Hi everyone. I guess what I'll be trying to outline is how the FMA can be part of the solution to what is now a worsening housing crisis considering COVID-19. We'll briefly touch on COVID-19 in this as well. Just to give you an overview of the system that we have, it's a volumetric light gauge system. So it's when we're bringing elements to site, they're 90 to 95% complete. So all of your bathrooms, floor finishes, wall finishes, everything is complete, a full volumetric solution. So I'll show you a brief video now of the factory. In the factory, prior to it going to manufacture, one of the elements that we do is we convert all of our drawings into Vertex, and we use CAD/CAM software then. So we deal with the raw material. The light gauge steel itself comes in a large roll, and then we put it through a roll forming system using this computer-aided manufacturing software. And that then will roll, profile, punch, dimple every individual stud and cut it to length to give it a unique code. So we'll just jump into a video of that. As you can see, it produces all of the studs, sole plates and head plates, noggings with limited or no waste. The guys here then are putting together everything on tables. So all of your walls, floors and ceilings are put together on tables on the ground. And then they'll move from here onto a flatbed, which rolls through the factory, and they're effectively made into boxes. So each of these individual boxes, then we complete all of the first fix, mechanical and electrical, in each of these individual modules. And then they go through our NSA, our factory production control quality check, in a step-by-step process. And as you can see, they roll through the factory. So any individual task can't roll into the next activity until it passes this quality check process. And that's fully audited. As you can see, we do everything in the factory, from kitchens to internal finishes to fitted furniture. And one of the key things for us is managing design parameters. So we try and ensure that everything suits modular. So when you look at transport, that's probably our key piece that causes difficulty in design from time to time. So by and large, most housing projects and most apartment projects have no issue whatsoever, or social housing, student accommodation, hotels, that kind of stuff. Because we can work with anything that is less than 4.2 meters. You know, we can work with stuff that's more than 4.2 meters, but it's a guard escort. And then if you go to the length of the modules, generally it's about between 12.5 and 14 meters is where we max out without guard escorts again. So that kind of gives you a flavor for the dimensions. And then from the top of the road to the top of the module can be 4.65 meters. So generally we work to about 3.15. As you can see from the units, you're generally seeing something that doesn't really look like modular. We're currently working out of 100,000 square feet, which is the right-hand side of the image. The left-hand side of the image is another 100,000 square feet of facility that we have, that we're about to move into at the end of this year. So we have a couple of larger projects that we're looking at to the back end of this year, and once those projects kick off, we're going to use the extension of the factory to I suppose ramp up in production. At the moment, we've the capacity for about 1,000 apartments or 200 or 500 houses a year, so about 2,500 modules. I guess, as Alan said, we now have 10-story certification from the NSAI. Last year we did about 210 units, and we also completed our 500th home. So we're now at about 600 and odd houses that we've delivered. We did our largest project to date last year with Glenveigh, who are an excellent client for us, and we did 134 units at the start of last year in Donabate and in Simple Woods, and that was a kind of a mid to high range development there. And we've also diversified into other markets. So we'll show you a brief video of an apartment, and we also completed a hotel extension in the Glenroy, which was, I suppose, a really interesting project for us to work on, because it gave a flavour for where we could get modular to in the factory and what the hoteliers expected. Our cold forming process that you saw at the start of the factory is all C certified, and everything else then works to the NSAA cert. I suppose all of our details have been fire and acoustic tested over the last 4 or 5 years. This is probably the most complex element of our system, in that we've had to spend a significant amount of money and also a significant amount of investment in time in getting both the certification and also the acoustic and fire testing completed. But at the end of all of that, then we have a full suite of details and drawings that are freely available and within the NSAI sort that architects and design teams can work to. Briefly, I guess one of the things that we would say with regard to benefits at the moment is that if COVID-19, if the restrictions come in and they go and they come back in again, it kind of, I suppose modular gives you a resilience against that stop-start nature. Like at the moment, we're building 36 apartments, of which 18 are anything between 20 and 80% complete for a project in Drimna, Dublin. But they're all held within the factory at the moment, so they're at no risk of weather or anything else. So it's quite, I suppose, a resilient system. And also you can turn on and off the factory a little bit easier than you can a building site, you know, trying to protect things against the weather and stuff. So there is an element there. Plus, in a factory environment, we've 60 modules on the floor at any given time, and we've about 100 in the workforce. We can cut that to 60 in the workforce and ensure there's only one person in any module at any given time. So that kind of helps as well. When you go through that quality process, I won't labor the fact, but you know, every individual module is checked 43 to 48 times, dependent on the type of system that it is. So you're going to have very little or no snagging on most projects. And generally we're seeing, if it's a housing project or an apartment project, about a 50% reduction in the program. We'll chat about that a little bit later again. And where we're quite lucky, we're in a rural location. We've absolutely, you know, brilliant staff, brilliant workforce on the ground in Ballyjamesduff, which is pretty much in the middle of nowhere. I suppose that gives a very stable workforce to us, and there is a skills shortage in the industry. I suppose we've run quite a number of financial models and projects, and there is a misnomer out there, or a kind of a misconception out there that you're funding a lot of the project faster, so it'll cost you more money. Any financial model that we've ran has always ended up returning a lower cost of finance by using modular offsite. So it's something just to note. The acceleration of design and the fixed price up front are kind of two things that kind of go hand in hand. The accelerated design is something that any of the design teams we've worked with have really embraced it. You know, in the first 4 or 5 weeks, you know, while you're working, the guys are excavating on site, but you're picking out all of your sanitary ware, you're picking out all of your fixed furniture, you're picking out all of your kitchen ware, you're picking out all of your finishes. That has to happen immediately at the very start of the project. So it gives you that, I suppose, fixed design, and it also gives you that fixed cost. And obviously we've a reduced exposure to weather. One of the things that I think James might touch on a little bit more, and probably will explain it much better than I will, but is the repetition in design. And the external element can look like anything at all. And this is a typical floor plan that we took on a project that we spent a couple of days looking at. And there's 487 apartments on this project. It wasn't designed for modular, but within a couple of days, we recognized that we had only 10 real module types in this project. And you can imagine that against 1,208 modules, that was giving us a huge amount of repetition. With that, then we price modules per module, and a lot of companies do. So that means that when you're pricing it per module, it means that if a PRS scheme come to a client and say, instead of 52% of 2-bedroom apartments, we want 58% or 60%, or they want to change the mix, you have effectively like Lego blocks with a value against them. So you can chop and change. And from a timing perspective, then once you get into manufacture, from where you saw the LGS being rolled, it's a 15-day process to get from that point to the other side of the factory, where we fully finished module with all of your laminated flooring or your floor tiling done, all of your wall ceilings finished, and your kitchens complete. So it's a fairly significant volume. And as you can see here, from a schedule of accommodations perspective, trying to manage this from a commercial perspective, from a QS point of view, is quite easy. You've 10 module types to manage against 1,208 modules. So it's a really effective way of managing costs. From a timing perspective, generally we'll install 2 houses a day. We'll show you a brief time lapse of that in a sec. And about 4 apartments a day. Student accommodation and co-living gets really interesting then. There's a kind of I suppose, a balancing act to do between weight and installation. But if you have a bedroom, corridor and bedroom in one module, you could probably get up to 20 student accommodation beds done in a day, which is a fairly significant program shift. And that would be 90-95% complete. So you can see here, this is 2 typical 2-bedroom apartments that we pull together in a Revit model. You've got a bedroom module installed in an hour, the 2nd bedroom module and the kitchen dining space installed in an hour. So you can see quite quickly how within a morning or within a day, you can install a pair of 2-bedroom apartments quite quickly. The slowest project that we've programmed over the last while has been posts, groundworks and foundations. Our element of it, superstructure wise, has been about 50 weeks, a relatively large project. But against the traditional program was 96 weeks. So I think that's a fairly significant reduction in time. Generally, from our perspective as a business, we're not the main contractor on site. So the main contractor is the guy who's responsible for all of the scaffolding and the attendances, the external finishes, and the roadways and external works. But I guess just to show you what we produce and what we deliver, as you can see, the kitchens are installed here in the modules. In this module, in this instance, there's no insulation in the internal walls. That's something that we nearly always do because we feel it just offers a different finish, but you know, it's to client spec, so the client can reduce or remove elements as they wish. As you can see here, the 2 modules are getting installed on the ground floor, but you can see that there are services sitting on top of the ground floor modules. They still do in our new designs, but this video is about 2.5 years old. So what we do now in every one of our projects is we have a weather tightness membrane that sits on top of every module, on top of all of those services as well. So not only are we shrink wrapping it, but we have a temporary weathering on every module as well that stays on the module afterwards. When the guys are landing it in, all of your PIR is installed and your Abbey slots are already installed as well. So your lateral restraint for your external facade is on as well. When we're installing the upper floor modules, the guys are prepping that prior to lifting them on, and they're installing any of the stone wool that might be required. And you can see here that your air tightness membrane is on, all of your fire bags are already taped off and on, and it's all in accordance with our standard details, which have been fire tested. So when these modules get landed on, the guys will rip off the last of the shrink wrapping, they'll tape up the air tightness membrane, and then effectively you have your per-assembly attached houses up and relatively complete. We have almost always done volumetric roofs. We've done panelized and timber frame as well, but for us the volumetric roof, it just suits our system much better. It just means that we're fully weathered within the day, and it's quite a simple and easy installation. So that kind of gives you a flavor for the type of systems that we work with. One of the sample projects that I just like to show you is Island Bridge. It's a 5-story apartment block. It's only 20 apartments, but it'll give you a flavor for an extremely confined site. But the modules that we're showing you being installed in the next time lapse, all the laminated floors are done, all the kitchens are in, all the M&E is done, any of the furniture is in. It's literally just connections that are left. So it just gives you a flavor for kind of the time and pace of installation. So I think we started in and around lifting modules in on the 23rd of September. So on this site, on the left-hand side of the site, you have a river. On the right-hand side of the site, as we're looking at it, you have a listed building. And then you have where the camera is sitting is on a balcony, and you have another apartment block sitting at the other side of the project as well. So an extremely confined postage stamp type site, infill site. So we put the 20 modules or the 20 apartments in here. It was 45 modules. So you've got 2 modules per apartment. So 2 bedrooms and in one module, and a kitchen dining space in another module. And the longer of the modules that you're seeing here is the core, which sits in between those. And these are externally accessed modules. So you can see that there's a weather membrane on all of these. And you can see that the guys, as they're lifting them on, they're preparing with the fire details ever before any of the modules get landed into place. We also bolted the balconies on the ground and lifted them in with the modules as well. So you can see it's a relatively quick process. Storm Lorenzo wasn't much of a storm, but it happened kind of halfway through this project. So it gives you a flavor for kind of the resilience against weather. It kind of gives you a flavor for the type of pace that the construction can run at. And as I said, what's left beyond this then basically is just internal connections. Just to give you a flavor of some of the projects that we've done in the past, the image on the top right hand of the screen is Rahilian and Donabate. That's a 1,700 square foot 4-bed. We have, beside that, then you've a pair of semi-Ds, which are 1,440 square feet, again 4 beds, and then you've got 3 beds at the top, which is 1,250 square feet, I think. So the finish can be anything at all, and I think that offsite in DFMA, as James had, we had a brief chat about this prior to starting here, and you know, it might have gotten a bad name prior to you know, modern methods, but I guess from our perspective, it's certainly you know, it can be at any level from a very base solution to a very, very high end. And there's another unit here, and again, you wouldn't know whether these were volumetric or not. From our perspective, the cost is something that's obviously quite critical. Generally, any of the projects that we've worked on in residential construction, our element of it will be somewhere between 80 and 90 euros a square foot, which can be plus or minus 3%. So it'll be more cost effective if it really suits modular, and it might be the same price if it's, you know, an average design. And if it doesn't suit modular, it might be slightly more expensive. Generally, our element in superstructure for apartments, we're seeing it, and we've run this with a number of our building colleagues on other projects, we're seeing it as being 1 to 3% cheaper on apartment blocks. And again, this is just our system, and but certainly we think that modular and offsite can offer cost savings, and it doesn't always come with a premium. I suppose the last piece of what we'd like to say is that, you know, from our perspective, what the guys in the UK are doing with regard to Homes England, and they've appointed Mark Farmer as their DFMA tsar and all this kind of stuff, it's really positive, but our government has to act here as well, because we also have a similar housing crisis in this country. One of the things that we would like to see is agreeing a template design which suits all offsite. That's not just modular, that's panelized, you know, it's all types of systems. And I know Rosanna will talk about other systems after us. You know, volumetric and MHI certainly won't solve the housing crisis. DFMA, panelized, volumetric and timber frame won't solve the housing crisis either, but certainly we should be a significant part of it. And I think that what we can do as an industry is agree a template design which suits all offsite systems. And that's something that it shouldn't be an e-tenders process that takes 6 months and then that runs on to another competition which takes another 6 months and nothing's been built and we're a year and a half down the road. That's something that can happen in collaboration as an industry quite quickly. The AHBs and the councils and any of the significant private players, they know what a fair price is for the various different units and agree what a fair price is. And I think that that's absolutely doable. They're two quite simple things that can be done in conjunction with the industry. A template design and a fair price, or template parameters for design, a fair price. And I think James might touch on some of the kind of parameters in a while, and the ability to design easily for modular. And then what I would say is the government have to act as Homes England have with the likes of Sekisui and Ilka Homes, and take and contract capacity in multiple factories using multiple systems. Because if you look at some of the companies in Ireland, like the Timber Frame Company or Signum or Vision or Horizon or any of these guys, it's say that they're competition for us. For us, the industry has to work. So we would like to see competition. We would like to see the industry as a whole thriving. And from our perspective, we'd like to see those companies, being part of this as well. And if the government contract capacity in all of these businesses, what it'll do is it'll guarantee the lowest price, because it'll provide certainty to the factories. It'll give the labour force in very remote locations certainty. And that's something that is at a significant risk coming out of or heading into a potential recession at the moment. And also it'll give resilience for the next 18 to 24 months against this COVID-19. So we can be producing units in modular or panelized or whatever it might be, and storing them. And as soon as sites become available, they can be installed within days as opposed to months and years. And I think that that's probably what we would see as being, the optimum solution at the moment for the FMA and how we can see it moving forward. So thanks very much. Hopefully that has given you a little insight into volumetric. And if you have any questions, Alan or anybody else.
Thank you, Micheál. That was really an excellent overview. And those 2 points at the end, the template design and the fair price is a good point in which to, I suppose, reflect on for the future presentations. So just to remind you all, for those of you who attended a little bit later this morning, you're very welcome to the CitA's Digital Transformation Series 2020. We just had our first speaker, Micheál Keohane. I've put up a few questions there on the chat. So just encourage anyone who has any questions to pop them into the chat facility. Does anyone have a question maybe before we go on to our second presentation? Please feel free to come in. Might take 1 or 2 questions. So I popped a comment in there about the Land Development Agency. What's their role in Ireland? What's their
Yeah, we're chatting to the LDA at the moment. Actually, we've just done a presentation for them through ACOM. So I think that those guys are starting to ramp up as best they can, and it's one of the elements in that they're really looking at to facilitate. And I think what the LDA are looking at is having a number of projects which will be solely for the FMA, and maybe even a couple of projects that are solely for volumetric, because they'll have such a volume that they need to have a multitude of solutions. So I think that they're certainly looking at it and kind of a blended solution across their portfolio.
Okay. We have a question from Paul Brennan of BAM. How are you managing material procurement during these uncertain times?
I suppose it's been a little bit complex over the last while. We carry about 500,000 euros of stock at any point in time. So the vast majority of what we'd require with regard to plaster boarding, insulation, finishes, the vast majority of that we have access to. Thankfully, the ports haven't closed, so we've been relatively okay with regard to deliveries. But we are certainly seeing a slowdown in availability. And that's something that can, I suppose, impact on elements, and that it's something that the design teams need to be aware of, that there needs to be a little bit more flexibility with regard to availability, again, because, we might have to change products from time to time against what's available as opposed to what's prescribed, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, maybe one more question from Keith Elliott. What is the typical design life of a modular house?
Well, our NSA cert says we have to have a minimum of a 60-year design life, which is the same as any traditional construction. So that's what our NSA.
Okay, so